been really drawn into a true crime story, and then, bam, it hits you that it happened really close to home.
Yeah, it's almost like you're watching the news, but it feels so, I don't know, personal. Makes you realize these aren't just stories for entertainment, right?
Yeah,
These are real people, real lives.
exactly. And that's what we're diving into today, a case that shook Toronto. Tess Richey, she was only 22.
And it's a case that highlights some really, really important issues that unfortunately we see far too often. Violence against women, the need for police accountability, things like that.
Absolutely. So Tess, she was living in Toronto, working towards becoming a flight attendant, and really seemed to be, going after her dreams.
Right. She had moved to the city for school, was working at a coffee shop, even had this whole plan to be an au pair in Italy at some point. It seemed like she had her whole future figured out.
It's heartbreaking. But sadly, in November of 2017, things took a very, very dark turn.
She had just gone through a tough breakup and decided, hey, let's go out, have some fun. She met up with a friend at Cruise and Tangos. It's a pretty well-known bar in Toronto.
In the Church in Wellesley Village.
Exactly, that's the one.
And it's just so sad because everything about Tess, from what we've learned, pointed to someone so full of life. She loved to travel. She was passionate about languages, even had her own YouTube channel where she talked openly about, some difficult things she had gone through.
Yeah, she talked about some past abusive relationships, which is incredibly brave, especially at that age.
It really is. So on November 24th, she had actually spent the day with her sister, kind of seeking comfort, I guess, after the breakup. And then she decides to meet up with her friend Riley Semard, at this bar.
And there's this one detail that always gets me. Before Tess even left that night, her sister actually helped her order an Uber. It's such a simple act of kindness, something sisters do all the time.
Right, completely unaware of what was about to happen.
Exactly. So they get to the bar, and from the security footage, it seems like they were having a good time, just letting loose, dancing, having a few drinks.
Like a normal night out with your friend.
Exactly. And this is where we need to introduce someone who plays a pivotal role in this story, Kalen Schlatter. He was also at the bar that same night, though at this point, their paths hadn't really crossed.
He's kind of in the background for now. So as the night goes on, Tess and Riley have a few more drinks, maybe one too many, and they're asked to leave by the bouncer.
It's something we see a lot in these types of cases, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Alcohol can really impair your judgment, make you more vulnerable, and I think that, unfortunately, sometimes creates an opportunity for people with bad intentions.
You're right, it's a common thread. So they're outside the bar, having a cigarette, and they start talking to a woman named Michelle Teep, who lives nearby.
Oh, yeah, I remember Michelle.
And Tess, she's still upset about this breakup, and she confides in Michelle a little bit. And Michelle, bless her heart, offers some words of comfort.
It's a small act of kindness, but it really speaks volumes. It shows how, even in a big city, you can find these moments of connection in the most unexpected places.
I agree. So it's about 4 a.m. now, and Riley's boyfriend texts asking her to come home. So Tess, she calls it a night and orders an Uber, the one her sister helped her set up earlier.
And this is where things take a really sharp turn. Because even though the security footage shows Riley leaving, Tess never actually gets into that Uber.
Oh, no.
Instead, she's seen walking away with Kalen Schlatter, that man who was at the bar earlier, and they disappear into the darkness.
Oh, man. That's a terrible feeling, knowing something is wrong.
It's like that feeling you get, when you realize something terrible has happened or is about to happen.
Oh, absolutely.
And for Tess's family, that feeling, that dread, turned into a nightmare.
You're trying to get hold of her. She's not answering her phone.
No answer, no sign of her. Nobody knows where she is.
And the police, from what we've gathered, they weren't much help either.
Actually, it's even worse than that.
What do you mean?
So the police, they were called to the area where Tess was last seen, right? They were searching, but get this, they didn't find her.
How is that even possible?
I know, it's unbelievable. And it just goes to show you sometimes these systems, they fail us.
It's terrifying because how many other cases, how many other families are out there going through the same thing?
It's a chilling thought.
And in Tess's case, it was actually her own mother who made the most horrific discovery.
I know, it's almost too awful to even talk about.
I can't even imagine.
Tess's mother, Christine, she had come down from North Bay to help with the search, and she was retracing Tess's last steps with a friend just a day before Tess's birthday, by the way.
Oh, God, that poor woman.
They were near this building under renovation, and there was this kind of hidden stairwell.
Hidden.
Yeah, it was narrow, easy to miss, leading down to a basement door.
Okay.
And this is the crazy part. It was so close to where the police had searched
You
before.
kidding me? Are you serious?
Just meters away. Christine's friend, who was a nurse, noticed something at the bottom of the stairs and called out to Christine.
Oh, my God.
It was Tess.
I don't even have words.
It's unimaginable the pain she must have felt.
And they found her, what, 5 days after she disappeared?
5 days, yeah. The sources mentioned she had her purse, her phone was nearby.
So she wasn't robbed.
Right, and they found a gash on her forehead, bruises on her arms.
Oh, God, that's awful.
It's heartbreaking, and I think it's so important to remember these details because it reminds us this wasn't just some news story, you know?
Right. This was a young woman with her whole life ahead of her.
And to make matters worse, the police, they initially thought it was an accident.
An accident. Come on, how could they even...
I know, it's baffling, right? Thankfully, though, they didn't stick with that for long.
They didn't.
No. The autopsy came back, and it was determined that Tess had been strangled. It was ruled a homicide. And to make things even more complicated, they found male DNA on her clothing.
Oh, wow. So now they have a whole new direction to go in.
Exactly. And that's when Kalen Schlatter, the man last seen with Tess, remember, he becomes the main suspect.
Okay, this is where it gets interesting.
Right, so you remember that security footage, the one of them walking together?
Uh-huh.
Well, the police, they release it to the public, hoping for a break in the case.
Makes sense.
And it turns out Schlatters himself, he contacts the police, claiming to be the man in the video.
No way. He turned himself in after seeing the footage.
That's what it looks like. But
Yeah.
here's the thing. He insisted that Tess was alive when they parted ways.
Okay.
But when they started questioning him, his story, well, it started to fall apart.
What happened? What did he say?
Well, first of all, he immediately asks for a lawyer.
Well, that's not necessarily, proof of anything.
True, but it did raise some red flags.
Right, I see what you mean.
And then, get this, he refuses to give a DNA sample.
That's suspicious, especially if he's so adamant that he's innocent.
Exactly. But this is where it gets really interesting. While he's at the police station, his parents, they bring him a bottle of water. He takes a few sips, throws the bottle away. And that, my friend, was his big mistake.
Oh, man, they got him. What happened?
You know it. The police, they get their hands on that discarded water bottle, and guess what?
The DNA matched.
Bingo. Just like that, they had their man.
So they arrest him. But something about all this seems strange, right?
What do you mean?
I don't know. I mean, he goes from being a potential witness to the prime suspect.
Yeah,
And he practically throws himself into the middle of the investigation.
you're onto something there.
It's like he wants to control what's happening, like he wants to be in charge of the story.
You're picking up on something very important.
So they have Schlatter's DNA, but he's still saying he didn't hurt Tess. How can he explain that away?
Well, that's what makes this whole thing even more disturbing. As they dug deeper into Schlatter's life, a very different picture started to emerge. Remember how everyone thought he was this, good guy, maybe just in the wrong place at the wrong time?
Yeah, it seemed like they were painting him as some kind of innocent bystander.
Totally. But that image, it completely shattered when investigators took a closer look at his phone and computer.
Oh, what did they find?
Let's just say they found some pretty disturbing stuff. We're talking a deep, dark interest in violence, specifically sexual violence and choking.
Ugh, that is so creepy. Talk about a wolf in sheep's clothing. It really makes you wonder, how well can you ever really know someone?
Seriously. And unfortunately, it gets worse. They started talking to his ex-girlfriends, and a pattern of really disturbing behavior emerged.
What do you mean, what kind of behavior?
Well, the sources we have are pretty vague on the specifics, probably for legal reasons. But they do say that his exes described him as having, let's just say, unique interests.
Unique interests. Okay, so not great interests.
Right, and some of those interests involved, you guessed it, violence, including choking.
This is awful. This guy was basically living a double life.
Exactly. It's terrifying to think about. But remember, at this point, he's still innocent until proven guilty, right? The big question was, could they prove that he was responsible for Tess's death?
Okay, so the trial starts, and Schlatter's still sticking to his story, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But get this. He actually changes his story multiple times during the trial.
Wait, what? Come on, that's so suspicious.
Right. So first, he's saying that he left Tess alive after they made out in the stairwell.
Made out. I thought he said he barely knew her.
I know. Then He changes it up, saying he was drunk and doesn't remember
Oh,
anything.
come on, the classic "I was blacked out" excuse. Please.
Exactly. And then finally, when he's actually in court, he says that Tess was the one who came on to him.
Oh, give me a break. That is so messed up. He's just trying to blame the victim.
It's disgusting, and honestly, it's a classic tactic used to discredit victims, especially women. But with the DNA evidence and his constantly changing story, the prosecution had a lot to work with.
So they didn't buy his act.
Not for a second. The prosecution, they brought the receipts, they had the security footage, witness testimony, the DNA, and get this testimony from Schlatter's own cellmate.
Wait, his cellmate. He turned on him.
Big time. This cellmate, he was a career criminal turned informant, and he told the court that Schlatter had confessed to killing Tess while they were locked up together.
No way. What did he say?
The cellmate said that Schlatter gave him specific details that matched the evidence, and he even said that Schlatter expressed remorse, but get this, only for himself.
Oh my God, are you serious?
Dead serious. He regretted getting caught, regretted what it would mean for him, but not for actually taking Tess's life.
That is ice cold. I mean, at that point, the prosecution had him dead to rights, right?
They absolutely did. And in March of 2020, the jury delivered their verdict, guilty of first-degree murder.
First-degree murder. So, for those of us who don't speak lawyer, what does that actually mean?
Basically, it means that the jury believed he planned to kill Tess that night. It was premeditated murder. And for that, Schlatter was sentenced to 25 years to life in prison.
25 years. Doesn't seem like enough, does it?
That's what a lot of people say, especially Tess's family. Even though Schlatter was behind bars, they weren't done fighting for justice. They filed a huge lawsuit, a $20 million lawsuit, against everyone involved. Schlatter, the police, the bar, the property owners, everyone.
Wow, they weren't messing around.
They wanted accountability. They wanted to send a message that this could never happen again.
And did they get it? Did anything actually change because of the lawsuit?
Well, the Toronto police did admit that they messed up. 2 officers were actually charged with misconduct because of how they handled the initial search. And even though those charges were eventually dropped, both officers did say they were responsible for their actions. They even agreed to help train other officers on how to handle missing persons cases.
Well, at least that's something, right?
It is something, but it's a reminder that the fight for real change, for accountability, it's far from over.
It's a fight that we all need to be a part of.
100%. The case of Tess Richey, it's a tragedy. There's no other way to put it. But it reminds us that behind every headline, every news story, there's a real person, a family whose lives are changed forever.
And it reminds us that we have to keep fighting for justice, for a world where these kinds of things don't happen anymore.
Couldn't have said it better myself.